With multiple use cases of NFT, have you ever wondered of a digital receipt NFT for bookkeeping? If this sounds interesting to you, continue listening. Welcome to PEEPanEIP, episode 95. I'm Pooja Ranjan, wishing my fellow Ethereum community a very happy 2023. In this NFT special episode, today we will talk about EIP-5570 digital receipt non-fungible token and upcoming Ethereum standard with author Sean Darcy. EIP-5570 is a standard track ERC proposal documented on 1st September 2022 and currently is in draft status. According to the proposal, this EIP proposes a standard schema for digital receipt of transactions. Sean Darcy, the author of the proposed standard, is also a co-dev to different blockchain projects. To know more about Sean and learn about EIP 5570, let me welcome him to the show. Thank you for joining us, Sean.
How are we doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you. Thank you once again, Sean, for joining us. Generally speaking, we request our author to share a bit about their professional background, how they get into the Ethereum ecosystem, and then we get into the presentation. So yeah, now feel free to screen share if you need to, and yeah, over to you.
Yeah, let's do it. So I'm here today talking about digital receipt NFTs. I have recently opened this Ethereum protocol proposal, and it is a broad level, high level schema for receipts and a good way to use them on the blockchain. A bit of background about myself is I am an ex-accountant. I, up until COVID times, was working as tax and doing small business bookkeeping for Australians. And then during COVID, we got hit pretty hard. So I had some spare time, spent that reviewing Ethereum things, specifically Geth. And that ended up leading into a developer role with my current company, Oxen. And on the side as well, I do a lot of projects relating to accounting. I'm the maintainer of GoDB Ledger, which is a self-hosted accounting software. High level of that is it is a essentially, if you took Geth itself, ripped out the back end, put in some double entry bookkeeping, and that as a whole, I guess, is me trying to automate the finance sort of side of things, specifically for accountants. And then as part of that, I sort of realized that digital receipts play a core part in how we go about automating finance. And that eventually has led to this Ethereum proposal, which is now up. It's ERC-5570. It's currently in draft status, and I am excited to talk about it. But it's essentially, I want to talk about first, before we go too much into it, about why receipts are so important to automating the finance industry as a whole. And the background I sort of came was when I was working on the GoDB Ledger stuff, is you have to record your transactions in your financial software. Businesses do this every day. They record their transactions they've spent, and then they summarize that into a set of financials, which eventually go into a tax return. It goes into a lot of places. And the classification of those transactions is often based off a receipt. If you are the person spending the money, you often know what you've spent your money on. But if you're getting someone else to classify it, you usually get, like your accountant's usually the one doing it. So they usually dig up a bunch of receipts to find out how to classify your transactions. And this is what happened with me, is I was trying to classify some transactions and got frustrated that my bank accounts didn't show this to me directly. And I'm like, why doesn't this directly exist within my bank statement? And fortunately, us in the crypto industry have a bit of an advantage, is we can build these things directly into blockchain, which has led to this ERC. So the receipts get used for a lot of places, not just in the record keeping. when you're reimbursing people and when you're giving refunds to people, you also need copies of these things. And in general, they're a bit of a pain to keep track of. So having a digital way is always like better. And receipts are something that businesses are obligated to give. There's a bunch of legislation, specifically in Australia. It's kind of like if you're over $30, you should be giving a receipt to people. At least in Australia, this hasn't really been digitized. We're still getting physical receipts. I go to like the supermarket, and at the end of the transaction, they spit out a physical receipt. Some businesses give you a digital copy, but not many. And most of these digital copies are barely digital anyway. They're mostly like PDFs that get emailed to you and stuff. And even then, I'm kind of like, I don't really want to give you my email address. Like, you're just going to spam me with marketing now. This is always sort of leading to like, how's a better way of doing this? And one of the really good things about NFTs is we have this metadata section where we store a bunch of information. And it's a very, very good place to put receipt data. So we've already got, if you look at the NFT metadata extension, there's sort of 3 fields we require on an NFT, which is name, description, image. And this is given everything that NFTs are today. And my like proposal that I'm sort of saying is we can also standardize a way to give like a receipt schema. And so there's a fairly uninteresting schema to receipts. They are literally just a date with a list of items, really. And it's not super exciting, the schema itself. I've defined one in the ERC, but I don't think it's very exciting, to be honest. There's not too much that's interesting in there. And we can put that directly into the NFT metadata. And then I'm also saying, like, another good spot, I think, to live in there is the signature of the receipt. So the vendor who is giving you the receipt, say Walmart or something, they have their own signature so they can digitally sign the receipt. So when you have a copy of this receipt and that digital signature matches, you know that this digital signature is legitimate, which is good for a variety of reasons. I think I'll discuss that a little bit later though. So the schema is defined in this proposal. Not super interesting. What is interesting is we are putting it in an NFT, which means we link the transaction on the blockchain directly to the transaction information. And what does this bring to Ethereum? So the first of all, the one that sort of excites me is it automates our record keeping, which is, again, leads back to the GoDB Ledger sort of stuff, is we can have a computer just scan these receipts. If you're running a business and you're buying things, the information is right there for the computer, and then they can classify things. But it also turns out that these receipts form the basis of a lot of other projects that you can do. So if you have on the blockchain links to purchase history, and other businesses can have access to that. But then, like, there's some discussion I have a bit later on about encrypting stuff, so it's got some privacy elements to it. But if you want refunds and if you want like trade-ins and stuff, you can have the receipts that are living on the chain give you all the information you need to do that automatically. So when you want to process those things, there's no, oh, I am sending a receipt to a person who has to look at the receipt and then generates the like reimbursement for you. It can all be done with a click of a button, and a computer can do it all. And this is all possible because the transaction contains all the information you need for your receipt data. And then this leads to some nice things too. So you can kind of visualize like your MetaMask wallet. And if you were to open that up at the moment, you got a big list of your transactions, and sometimes there's not a lot of detail on what is going on there. But you would be able to have that wallet just click straight through to transaction data. It's like, why keep a box of receipts when you can just you can just click straight through to it in your digital wallet, which I think that's probably one of the more exciting things that, like, visually you could see this existing, and it should. It's like, why should you go anywhere else but your wallet to look for transaction data? Like, it could live straight in MetaMask. So what does a transaction look like under this proposal? So you can imagine going to a vendor's website and you're purchasing a physical good. A blockchain transaction occurs, probably transferring some Tether or USDC over to the vendor, which is you paying for the purchase. And then in that same transaction, the vendor would be issuing you an NFT. But it's not like an NFT, like an artwork NFT. This would just be purely containing the data of the transaction, which is why NFTs are pretty exciting in general, because it's a token, a unique token, and that's exactly what a receipt is in this case. So this NFT has a URI that points to a domain controlled by the vendor. So they would be maintaining the database of their receipts that they're issuing. When they process the purchase on the website, they would upload the details to their database, and then they would point their token URI to that. So at a later date, or immediately if you wanted, the customer can go straight to that token URI, look at the metadata of the transaction, and it would contain the receipt. And then if the signature stuff is contained, as I mentioned a couple of slides back, then you can save a copy directly to your file. And you don't need to keep a copy of that online, but like the vendor might, just for convenience for you. And this is sort of where the other interesting things we can do with the receipts is, in this ERC, everything's sort of just the details of the receipt. Nothing's encrypted in here, but that's not to say that there's other ERCs I've seen coming out that detail how you can encrypt NFTs and that. And I did see a couple that were very interesting at the same time I launched this ERC. So this is not built into this ERC, but I very much think that would be the default in the future. But right now it's just like the clear text details of it. And the signature field, this again allows traceability. So in Australia, if you want a purchase to be like a valid deduction in your tax return, you're supposed to be able to provide a receipt. And one of the things you want is the auditors to be able to like check that it's a real receipt. And this is what the digital signature would allow, is like you would open up your receipt and you'd see a signature, verify that it matches the public key of the vendor, and then the third party would know that that's a valid receipt. So it'd be a valid deduction in that case. And that's built into this as well. So that's sort of exciting. I've got a list here of other resources that have sort of built along the way. The long form article on Medium is a very, it's a bit more, it's pretty much exactly what I've been discussing here, is it just goes into details and the technical specs as well. And then on top of that, there's a GitHub repository, this digital receipts ERC, which contains some example smart contracts and also a web app that can actually give out a digital receipt. And that's been hosted at receipts.darcyfinancial.com. An example digital receipt from that website is that top link. And then I've also got down the bottom a YouTube video showing how to use it. And you can kind of see, if you were to go to this, this top link here, it actually gives you an NFT image. So it takes what is in the NFT metadata already, and all the infrastructure we've got built for NFT art, and you can physically show that receipt in a form that looks good for humans already. So it very much like gives you both the data that computers need and also the like visual aspect that humans need. So it encompasses everything, and it's sort of like pretty exciting. I think there's a few questions that dive into a bit more detail for this, and I am pretty excited to dive into them because they seem pretty interesting. Did you want to start with those, Pooja?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much for presentation. This was great. And obviously it gives a very good high level picture of what this proposal is all about and how this will be used. Yes, we do have a few other questions which will help us dive more into it. My first question, which is, I think, a question for most of the people's mind, is like, why do we need an on-chain receipt, like a digital receipt, which, say, for example, if it's a transaction detail that we get it from etherscan.io, couldn't that be good enough to ensure the transaction is there?
Yeah, so I guess one of the things that's well, it sort of partially isn't on chain as well, because the NFT metadata is hosted by the vendor in the end in this case. So they would have their website, and they would have on top of it a link to their database of the receipts. And then the on-chain stuff is literally just the NFT. And what is contained on chain is simply just the NFT database that links the ID straight to the token URI. So the stuff that's actually kept on chain is quite minimal. There's been a few discussions that's come up around this and how you should or shouldn't save the data here. And I think that in general is a very interesting and probably the most the most unique thing about this proposal is how the digital receipt data is stored. And I guess in general, it's like, what is this and how is this different to digital receipts in general? Is kind of like, well, this is a digital receipt. The JSON scheme is not super interesting, but the way the data is stored is the unique stuff. And I'm saying here specifically that the data should be stored in a database hosted by the vendor, and then that is linked to the blockchain transaction through an NFT. And that differs to, I guess, a few of the digital receipts that exist today. I don't think they've got much traction, but that would be, there is essentially a hosted database somewhere, and you give the customer a link to that data, which is the essentially the token URI. So it's essentially the same, but the difference here is we've got the NFT, and that allows us to trace through the blockchain from the transaction itself to the digital receipt data. And that trace is something that's super useful. And as sort of mentioned before, it means when you open up your wallet, you can click straight to it. It means when you're trying to automate the transactions, you have 100% confidence in this receipt data linking up to that transaction, which if you break that link, there becomes an element of uncertainty. It's like, has the person provided the correct receipt for this transaction? I need to verify that. Whereas if it's already included in the transaction itself, there's no room for it to be wrong. Like, you can only be linked to one, and that one really should, if it doesn't match the details, as in like the amount doesn't match, then you're like, okay, there's something wrong here. But if it links and it's also the correct amount, then you're very confident that that transaction data is correct. And my computer script that I'm trying to automate my record keeping with can just go from there. It doesn't need to make a pop-up. It doesn't need to do anything that says, oh, please, can you double check this receipt to make sure it's right? This seems a bit weird. Whereas if you don't have that link, it kind of becomes like a, please enter your receipt URL here. And then it needs to verify it, which is extra steps and it's extra friction to automating your finances. And that's primarily what I was excited about, is like, once that's gone, it's so easy.
That is wonderful. I mean, definitely it helps to find any transaction history way more easier and convenient. Yeah, ease is number one good point of this. I would like to ask you this coming from the proposal itself. The description suggests that EIP-5570 to be non-fungible token as digital receipt for physical purchases, where the metadata represents the JSON receipt. Is it limited to physical purchases, or it can be an extension to digital transaction as well?
No, it's absolutely not limited. So you could have your services recorded here and a bunch of other things too. Like you could be recording the receipt for refunds and stuff. I guess I've said like physical goods here because it's probably the place where Ethereum's doesn't keep a lot of data right now. The physical transactions occur, an amount gets transferred, but like what happened on the like actual physical side is done off chain and not recorded at all. So I guess it sort of just highlights here, and it probably could be improved that the transaction data contains stuff that isn't on chain right now and stuff that actually is in the physical world. And it's simply just highlighting that it's other information that's new, that's not already on the blockchain. But 100% I'd be using this for a receipt for my accounting services if I was issuing it as well. So it could be anything. There's not at all limited to physical goods.
That is good to know. Probably we could like mention it like it could be used in addition to this, that this could be used for physical purchases as well. Like even if the product is not from the blockchain world, not from the digital world, we can still have the NFT for that.
Yeah.
All right. You did mention about, there could be multiple usage of that. We know that NFTs are unique in itself. Even the author, William and Triken, who proposed the EIP-721 did mention about it. Like it's kind of deep, the ownership that is being reflected with these unique token, the NFT. Could you maybe share a few other use cases where you think this particular EIP would be useful? And I remember you mentioned about a demo. Maybe if there is something from there, we would like to share.
So my demo is mostly just showing how the physical thing, it literally just gives you a form and says, hi, if you'd like to use this form, you are welcome to do it, and it will generate an NFT for you. Yeah, so is that one up for you? Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So this is literally the demo app that's contained in that GitHub repository. And what it ends up doing is it gives you a preview of what the receipt will look like, and then just gives you a bunch of fields that you can fill out. And some of those are already filled out. And usually when I'm using this one, I just sort of click generate receipt. It goes through the Go Early test network. You have to connect your wallet. I don't have any ETH on me right now to like demonstrate it, but it will generate this receipt on an NFT. But what it does is this image that's saved on it is literally this exact one. This web app has some behind the scenes, generates the HTML to make an image, and then that image is uploaded directly to this NFT metadata, which is a bit unfortunate. That's not demonstrated. I should have double checked that, unfortunately. And the web app sort of just demonstrates like what it actually ends up looking like. So you actually got a physical NFT given to you, and it's got the contents of that image, and it's got the JSON data there. Some other uses for this sort of spring up from like, if you had links to this on chain, the other uses that would come out of it start coming from, say, like, I'm a business who has sold a bunch of products, but I also want to issue refunds for those products. Say you've bought your iPhone or something and you've paid for it in cryptocurrency, and you've got this NFT receipt for it. But like a week later, you want to get a refund for it. So the details that they need to process that refund already exist and are saved in your wallet. So the refund could be done in literally one step by a computer, and then it would issue you the box or something that you would need to return it. And this is opposed to saying like right now, if you wanted to get a refund for some object, you usually have to go to a person, a retailer. You say, here's my box, and here's a copy of my receipt. I did this a couple of weeks ago and it's broken. And if they're maybe on top of it, maybe there's a web form to do first of all, where you upload those things. And I guess like a human would review them behind the scenes. I'm not fully sure how they work in real life, but this is a step toward automating all that, because the data is already available and it's already verified that it came from the vendor, and it's already verified that it went to you. It went into your blockchain, so you can prove that you're the person that received it. So it's stuff like that, that when we've got this data available, businesses and projects can sort of leverage that data existing, and they can start doing interesting things. And the refunds is a good one. Like, again, I've come from it from, I want to automate my record keeping side of things. And I'm sure there's plenty more. I've had a couple of people reach out about projects. I don't want to spoil their beans too much, but yeah, it's a lot of data that we sort of want on chain. Like, you can imagine a transaction has like two sides of it. One is giving money. The other is giving like a good or service to the customer. And we represent currently only one side of that transaction in the blockchain itself right now, which is the funds being transferred. And I'm saying we should also contain the details of the goods or services being exchanged. There is a privacy element there, which is why I guess in future that I'll be linking this with another EIP that like encrypts it all. But yeah, your transaction should contain both sides of this transaction. And then once that data is available, we can start doing more interesting things and leveraging that data in the same way that once we have access to the transaction, Ethereum transaction containing like the amounts of stuff, a digital blockchain is a lot better than physical cash, I guess. There's a lot of advantages to having that. We've already seen that. It's the same here with the receipts, as we start leveraging that digital side of things and existing on chain, and we can build interesting things on top of it.
That is quite interesting. And you brought two important points when it comes to digital receipt or the receipt on blockchain. One is the encryption part, the security, privacy, and the other one is the storage part. You did mention about security and privacy. There could be another EIP which be linked with this. I would be curious to hear your thoughts about the storage part. I remember you mentioning about putting minimal data on chain. So what is the proposed method of storing?
Yeah. So the storage is, and I very much think that this is a topic that like a lot of people have opinions about, and like there's definitely was a lot of discussion about how you should store it. I am pretty confident in saying that the better way to do it is the same way we do NFT metadata, which is the data stored off chain, but the link to it exists on chain. So we have the NFT contract only really contains the single database that links to the address, and then off chain we store on a database that is controlled by the vendor. So in this web app here, the backend also, when you click generate, it adds that receipts to its backend, and then the NFT data is viewed via the token URI on the smart contract. So I think that is by far the most efficient way of doing this. There is some discussion there about what happens if the vendor deletes that information, which sort of is the same discussion as what happens if an artwork NFT project deletes their database. And I guess my sort of thoughts on that is if we have a signature on the receipt, so the receipt's data is signed, you can digitally copy that and save it to your own database at the time of purchase, which I guess is like the modern equivalent of taking a photo of your physical receipt, and then keeping that in a safe place anyway. Because your receipt in the real world, like a physical printed out one, gets damaged. They've got those sun exposed sort of like paper that turns blue if you leave it out too long. So like they get damaged after a certain time and they disappear, and you end up wanting to use the digital copy that you've made rather than the original. And here's the same. It's kind of like you would just copy the data directly into a file, into a database. In my case, I'd say GoDB Ledger should be the one that records it as the data. And you should have the software doing it directly. And then after a certain point, receipts sort of stop needing to exist anyway. Like a transaction that's over 7 years old in Australia, you don't even need it for the ATO. It's too old. No one really cares about it. So you're not going to get questioned about it. It's after a certain point. So it's kind of like if the data disappears after that point, there's probably no harm done. And we don't want that sort of permanently clogging up the chain either. The counter arguments to that, however, are people who reckon it should exist on chain. Therefore it's immutable, therefore it's permanent, which has a lot of like positives. Mostly it's just like, oh, what if someone fraudulently changes the data? And in this case, it's obviously the vendor who's capable of doing that. But I guess it also sort of brings up a change of what happens if it's incorrect in the first place. Like what if something comes up and the receipt is wrong? And it's like, well, now it's locked on chain, you can't change it, which seems pretty harsh considering like human errors sometimes occur. But like you can amend things, so it's not too big of a deal. But then you're starting to add like, well, now I've added like maybe a kilobyte of information to blockchain just for like a couple of receipts, and that doesn't seem super great situation to be clogging up the blockchain with that data. It can exist off chain. It gives you some lenience to if the vendor wants to change it because there's some mistakes, and it gives an opportunity for the data to disappear in the future if it's 15 years later and no one really wants to look at that receipt anymore. It's probably fair. However, it does sort of bring up that security sort of element, and I guess my response to, what if the vendor tries to change it and tries to be fraudulent there? And I guess my point is like, they still can be fraudulent anyway. Like the original transaction is created by them. I guess that's kind of, it's still possible in the real world. Like what if someone gave you a receipt and said, oh, you only actually purchased a chocolate bar instead of your PlayStation 5 or something like that. It's like, well, it doesn't actually benefit the business to do that in a lot of ways. So the incentives are not really aligned for a business to fraudulently create receipts for you. So I think it's a minimal sort of risk. But whereas the bigger risk is probably errors being generated. So you want to give some forgiveness. And that all leads to saying the better place to store this data is off-chain, and the link to the off-chain data through an NFT is the best place to put it all. Which is sort of what this proposal contains.
That sounds interesting. I don't know, probably storing them maybe on any L2 chain could also be an option, could be economical as well. And hopefully the durability for storing it on an L2 could be higher than an off-chain storage.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. But it still kind of ends up clogging the L2 chain up a little bit. It's a very good point though. It's obviously I'm a big fan of the off-chain, so like don't clog anyone's up and give the opportunity. But yeah, this is the thing afforded by L2s right now is, hey, it's cheap and easy and it's great.
Right, and probably there could be a standard for having integration of these L2 and mainnet that would help store bigger data on the side chains, and we can still have the transaction link on the main chain.
Yeah, and that's a fair point too, is you could probably even store this data. And like this is the thing about the token URI is it doesn't actually it doesn't have an opinion on where it's stored. So we could actually probably store a link to an L2 transaction possibly in there, and as long as it sort of resolves to the metadata. which sounds like an actually interesting proposal. It's like, what if the token URI pointed to a L2 transaction? Like, what is the data resolved to? I mean, that's probably an interesting idea in itself. But that's a very, very good point. It's like, hey, maybe we can store it on the L2 and that resolves the database sort of situation.
I hope so. Well, my next question is related to proposal status and the EIP process. I couldn't help but notice that the proposal was documented in September 2022, but the discussion started early in July 2022. I mean, this is generally the recommended process when anyone wants to document any standard for Ethereum blockchain. We recommend that create the discussion, figure out if people are interested in that, and then come up with a proposal. So that is the best thing that you have done. So thank you so much for doing that. My question is, the proposal already received a lot of attraction, a lot of question answers are going on, the discussion to point. The proposal is still in draft. When can we expect this in review? And part B of this is how far it is from last call or maybe becoming a standard.
So I actually think it's ready for review now. I was, for the most part, I had a lot of discussion on the ETH Magicians forums, and then I was kind of trying to drum up some community engagement. So I've been trying to get on Twitter. I don't have a huge presence there, so it's been building that up as well, trying to get some interest in it. And that was sort of like, yeah, September, I launched the EIP. We did some back and forth, and then I've had a couple months of me trying to drum up interest on Twitter for it, which has had some good responses. Again, I've still quite a small presence there. So it's, as far as the like physical proposal data that's there at the moment, I have nothing to change really. Like it's ready to go, change to review. I was just trying to give the community some more opportunity to discuss it, particularly because the JSON schema is something I don't have a strong opinion on. It's literally just like, hey, here's my common sense idea of what the receipt data should look like. But I guess it's sort of the thing that a lot of people do have an opinion of, especially because different jurisdictions in the world have different requirements. So I was trying to get a variety of people to say like, hey, over in the US, there's the opportunity for multiple sales taxes, versus in Australia, we only have one sales tax that should go into a receipt. So that wasn't originally built in. I sort of knew that that was the case and was going to have to do that. So it's like those sort of different jurisdictions, I wanted comments from people, a big variety of people to do, which I've got a bit. And I think I've picked up a lot of, like a lot of the different jurisdictions and how they do it. So I was throwing that net as far as I could and trying to drum up as much interest as I could. However, as far as like, the actual proposal is right now, I'm pretty ready to click go on changing it to review status. So I think I'm probably doing that. It like just got through Christmas and New Year's, so it's probably there was a bit there where I wasn't really looking at my computer either. So I think I'm probably going to do that in the next week or two, and then yeah, if this this sort of call goes out at the same time, you're probably watching it at the same time it's for review. So that's probably what's going to be happening next.
That is good to know. Just for you to know, earlier there wasn't this status called review, so people used to keep it in draft and then straightway move it to last call. Now that we have review, it's safer to be in the review side, so everybody, including EIP editors, knows that this is for review. It's a good thing that proposal itself got attention, and we are getting a lot of questions answered going on in the chat. But moving to the right status is probably the best step to do. And for last call, there is a wait period of 14 days. So whenever the proposal is ready, you think that it is okay, fine, I'm good with going into the final, making it a standard, you can move it to the last call. It will be staying there for 2 weeks, 14 days, and then you need to make another pull request to move it to the final status. As far as the different jurisdictions you mentioned, I think this is going to be a standard. Customization can be done on individuals level, like wherever people want to implement this proposal. So it's good on and it could be on them to do the customization. On a high level, it is providing the JSON schema, so that should be useful for people.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Is I think there's probably an element of different jurisdictions need like specialization anyway, so that they'll probably need subcategories of the structure as well. So it's good to know that process. I think probably what you've mentioned, you've probably hinted at, is I've left it in draft when it should be review. Like, this is time for the community to be reviewing it, and that's what I've been trying to get them to do anyway. So review is probably the right place for it to be right now. There's no real changes I need to the structure anymore. So probably moving that ASAP.
Awesome. That's good to know. In case of any issues, questions, comments, like if you want to talk to EIP editor, you are welcome to join the EIP editing office hour, a bi-weekly meeting that is organized by Ethereum cat herders. Generally, the agenda is available on Ethereum cat herders /EIP-IP GitHub repository. So you can propose your pull request over there, and that would be taken care of.
Amazing. Awesome.
All right, it's time to wrap up. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the developers community?
No, I think I've got my sort of everything I had written down into the call, so I'm very happy with what I've got there. I appreciate your time. I think this has been really productive.
Likewise. Sean, Darcy, on behalf of Ethereum cat herders, I would like to thank you for joining us on PEEPanEIP and talking about EIP-5570 digital receipt non-fungible tokens.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
We really appreciate your contribution to the Ethereum EIP's repository. I look forward to seeing increased adoption of this proposal and hopefully become a standard. And on this note, thanks to everyone watching or listening to this special episode on NFT standards. Should you have any question, let us know in the form available in description, or leave a comment or reach us at cat herders Discord. Check out description to useful resources and guest Twitter to follow. We'll be back with another interesting talk next week. So stay tuned, keep sharing your love with Ethereum cat herders. Cheers.